MuellerProgram.com/donate.
Mary had a little man. The fault.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show.
Turn up your mind.
Did you believe his denial?
Honestly, never thought these words would come out of my mouth, but I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
So, I mean, the investigation's over now. Nothing in the Mueller report corroborated that salacious claim about the tapes and prostitutes. Do you regret making those comments, which some would see as sort of stoking the fires, or leaving it as an open question?
No, I was trying to give an honest answer, and my answer would be the same today.
But you could have just said, well, those were unverified.
Right, I thought that's what I was saying. That I don't know whether it's true or not. That's a crazy thing to have to say, because with any other leader, I would say that's preposterous. It couldn't possibly be true.
Really?
There's a footnote in the Mueller report that actually makes potentially oblique reference to these tapes, where someone in Russia is alerting, I think of Michael Cohen, in October, late October, we stopped the flow of the tapes. I don't know exactly what he means by that, but Mueller seems to connect it in some way to that allegation. Again, Mueller didn't say it wasn't the case. He didn't disprove it, but he also didn't establish that it was the case.
Right, and I think that person said that those tapes were false.
Yeah. Another important thing is the counterintelligence part of this work, which is whether the Russians had leverage over the president, that would be part of the counterintelligence investigation. Mueller left that with the FBI. His document is about a prosecutor's look at whether there are crimes to be prosecuted.
Do you think the Russians have leverage over President Trump?
I don't know the answer to that.
Think it's possible?
Yes.
Oh, that was good. Wasn't that good last night? That was so good. I know Stephanie, she had a hot date. So did I. I was with my boyfriend, James Comey, last night, just watching him on the CNN town hall. I'm loving these town halls. These town halls, you get a real long conversation. It's not a 10 minutes, interview. It's not a round table of people. It's just the subject that you want to speak to all to yourself, and you get to ask any question that you can dream up. And this was exactly the point I was hoping we would get to last night with James Comey. Not just the P tape, not just the footnote in the Mueller investigation, because, look, Mueller actually investigated whether or not crimes occurred and could not exonerate the president. He said if he could, he would so state, and he cannot. As far as the collusion, collusion is not a legal term. He did not look at the contacts as being criminal. He looked at whether or not there was literally a contract between the Russians and the Trump campaign, and he couldn't find a contract, but he said that people had lied to him so much, lied to Congress, Junior, so much, lied and used encrypted apps and destroyed evidence so often that he couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was a criminal conspiracy. Push that aside for a brief moment. There is what James Comey began. See, Mueller was only Mueller because Donald Trump fired James Comey 2 years ago. The anniversary of that thing, that horrible thing where James Comey was talking to, staff at the FBI out in L.A., and he looks up on the TV and he sees that he resigned, and he thought it was a prank. And then they changed it, and they said, oh, no, he was fired. James Comey learned about that on the TV. Nobody called him. Nobody had the decency to tell him. He learned about that on the TV 2 years ago this week. All right. But what Comey had opened was a counterintelligence investigation into Trump campaign officials who were being turned in to our FBI and to our senators, were being turned in by allied ambassadors and allied intelligence communities. And so Comey had to open a counterintelligence investigation. Barack Obama wanted it as well, but wanted it kept quiet because Donald Trump was on the campaign trail screaming every single freaking rally that the whole thing is rigged, putting Obama in a terrible position. If Obama, who knew what the Russians were up to, told the American people that there was Russian interference or that the election was in doubt and that Trump was correct and it was going to be rigged or whatever, he, Obama, would have been doing the work of the Russians for them. And Obama was in a really bad spot because Trump knew what the Russians were doing. That's why he was saying the whole thing was rigged. That's why he was the one who was rigging it. Now, Comey at the FBI opens up this counterintelligence investigation. That was not a criminal investigation. And Comey testified as much. He said that he now had permission to tell the American people after the fact, right? After the election, he was testifying in Congress and he said, I've now been authorized to let you know that there was a counterintelligence investigation opened on, Russian interference, and it looked at whether or not any member of the Trump campaign was in contact with any of these Russian interferers, right? And then Donald Trump decided that he would just fire James Comey. First, he tried to sweet talk him. He had him over for dinner. He had him to the White House. He asked him if he could let Flynn go. See, because Trump knew what the deal was. He asked him, could he let Flynn go? He asked him if he could do something to make all this go away. Could he pledge loyalty to him? Right? And Comey was like stunned by all this, and decided that they would, that him and Trump should not be talking, that him and Trump would never get along. And he thought that that was okay because he thought that would help with the separation between him and the president, which naturally should be occurring between the director of the FBI and the president of the United States, okay? And he wouldn't drop the counterintelligence investigation. So Donald Trump fired James Comey. Because Donald Trump fired James Comey, Rod Rosenstein, who became the deputy acting, right? He then felt pressure to appoint a special counsel, one Robert Mueller, to look into criminal obstruction of justice, which has been proven in the Mueller report. And that's how Mueller became Mueller. And last night, Comey explains all this to us.
President Trump says, and just very recently blamed the Obama administration, saying they didn't do enough about Russian interference. What should have been done more? Could more have been done? And you were at the FBI at that point.
That's a hard question. President Obama faced a very difficult choice. The number one goal for the Russians is to damage our democracy and undermine faith in our electoral process. If he makes an announcement that the Russians are coming for the election, has he just accomplished their goal for them? And has he given Donald Trump an excuse to say Obama fixed the election? So right. I get why he struggled with it. He did a very sensible thing. He tried to get the bipartisan leaders of Congress to jointly tell the American people this is going on. And in my view, to their everlasting shame, the Republicans refused.
You offered to write an op-ed, didn't you?
Yep.
And summer, that was warning the American public about Russian interference, and that the administration said no?
Yeah, I offered it to the administration saying, if you decide to try and inoculate the American people, I'm happy to do it. Here's what I would tell the American people. But I get why President Obama hesitated, and I agreed with his concern about not accomplishing the Russian goal for them.
And remember, Donald Trump is on the campaign trail knowing all this is going on, knowing it. Trying to forward a Trump Tower Moscow deal, lying about it, telling you he has no possible deals in Russia, and screaming that our elections are rigged. And no one could understand why. Well, now you do.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Well, they had 3 goals last election cycle, and Donald Trump was actually third on the list. The first, as you said, was They want to dirty up this democracy so it's not an example for other nations around the world. Second, they wanted to hurt Hillary Clinton, who Vladimir Putin hated. And last, they wanted to help Donald Trump, who even they weren't sure could win the election. So going into 2020, their goals, my common sense tells me, will be to continue their overarching goal, which is to damage the United States of America, and then to support President Trump, because surely they think they'll do better with someone who jokes on the phone with Vladimir Putin that the Russia thing is a hoax than they will with whoever else might be president.
And there you have it. That's the counterintelligence portion of the investigation. So where is this counterintelligence portion of this investigation? It's still with the FBI. Chris Wray has it. That's where Mueller left it. And that's why there's only a footnote about whether or not the president of the United States can be blackmailed by Russia because he was caught on tape at the Ritz-Carlton Moscow with a couple of hookers, or God only knows, peeing on the bed that Obama and Michelle Obama had slept in, having a party and defiling the bed because he has an obsession with Barack Obama. That's why Mueller doesn't look at it, because what would the crime be if there was a tape? What would that crime be? There wouldn't be a crime, and he only looked at crimes, right? And he found at least 10 crimes, at least 10. But the crazy part is that we don't know if the president is compromised by a foreign adversary. We don't know if the president, he won't release his tax returns, so we don't know who's paying him now. We know he won't comport with the emoluments clause, so we know that there's foreign, we at least know the Saudis come and they book rooms at his, postal hotel in D.C. We know Russians buy apartments from him and have for a very long time. We know Junior brags about Trump Tower Moscow and they're trying to do a deal. We know that Trump was in a deal with Moscow to build Trump Tower. He lied about it. Then they said, they sent Rudy Giuliani out on the TV, and Rudy said, they never signed anything. Then we find out, they did sign a letter of intent. It was just a letter of intent. Nothing ever happened. And as the story moves and the truth becomes known, they actually make excuses for why it's all okay. It's not okay. But this is why Trump won't release his taxes. And this is why we don't have the counterintelligence report. Because you now have an attorney general of the United States who's loyal to Donald Trump and not to us. And Chris Wray works for Barr. And it was really interesting last night to hear Comey's take on what has happened in this country with regard to Bill Barr. I mean, with regard to Rosenstein, what did he really think about Rosenstein? I mean, it's unbelievable. Here's Comey on why Rosenstein was co-opted by Donald Trump. Because remember, Rosenstein is the person who first wrote a letter saying Comey should go. And then Donald Trump shivs him and goes on Lester Holt and says to Lester, no, I didn't care about the recommendation that Rosenstein, I forced him to write. No, I didn't care about that. I cared about this Russia thing. And that's why I fired Comey. I was going to fire him no matter what the recommendation was. Remember he says that, right? And then Rosenstein is terrified he's going to lose his job after he appoints Mueller, and he's scared, and he's literally, there are Washington Post and New York Times stories about how Rosenstein was like crying. He was literally crying, begging Donald Trump, please don't fire me over Twitter. I mean, at least let me leave with my reputation. At least let me leave with that. And please don't fire me over Twitter. Holy crap. And then when he writes his letter, to say goodbye to, his job when it's finally all over, and they said, okay, you've outlived your usefulness, you can go now. They dismiss him. He writes a letter and praises the dear leader and tells him, I love your sense of humor and the way that you love the law. I mean, this man is defying any number of subpoenas. He never talked to Mueller. He lied to the American people, said he'd sit down with Mueller. Never did, said he would not answer any questions about obstruction. Now you know why. His son never talked to Mueller. There's a redacted portion of the Mueller report right after they talk about Junior, and we don't know what it says, but it could say that they didn't subpoena Junior because Junior invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege not to testify against himself. We don't know because it's redacted. But Comey laid out like what goes on in these dinners and how Donald Trump co-opts your soul, how he gets into your head, what he does, and that this is not for weak people being around this man. This is not for people of lesser character, because if you're accomplished but you have no character, if you're accomplished but you have no integrity, this man is going to eat your soul.
This president, because he's an amoral leader, shapes those around him. And that shaping sometimes pushes out someone who is a strong person of integrity, who stands up and says, not going to have it. But far more often it shapes and bends and pulls in weaker souls. And he does it. I've seen him. It's happened to me. The man lies constantly. In public, you've seen it. In private, the same thing happens. And he talks constantly. And so I sat there at dinner with him, and he went on about how he had the biggest inauguration crowd in history. He didn't make fun of a disabled reporter. And all of these lies are coming at you. And you're sitting there over your salad thinking, that's not true, that's not true, that's not true. But you don't interrupt the President of the United States and say, Mr. President, I saw the tape. You made fun of a disabled reporter. Instead, it washes over you. And all of a sudden, you finish the dinner or the meeting and you realize, oh, my God, I'm part of a silent circle of assent. Did I just agree that that's true because I didn't speak? And then there are these rituals of praise of the leader. And pretty soon, you're wrapped so tightly in this web that there's no way out for you.
Wow. Now, remember what he said in the very first clip we played today. He said, much to the Republicans' everlasting shame, when President Obama went to them with this information, briefed the Gang of Eight, and told the Republicans in the Senate, we need to make a joint statement so that the American people will have confidence that this isn't one party rigging an election the way this candidate is out there saying the election is rigged. He obviously knows what's going on, but so we need to make a joint statement so the American people will have confidence in the election and that both parties understand that there's an attempt being made to organize certain weak-minded people in this country to not only hate Hillary Clinton and to think that she's running a pedophile ring and all these crazy things, but also that there's an attempt to get them to organize, to show up at rallies, and people are doing it. People are showing up at rallies organized by Russians. In this country today, as we speak, there are numerous people who showed up to rallies that they thought were being organized by Donald Trump's campaign, but were being organized by the Russian GRU, by the Russian Internet Research Service, right? They're just crazy stuff. And they were going out there supporting the Russians, thinking they were supporting Donald Trump because the two were were not connected. And when Comey tells you that the Republicans, much to their everlasting shame, wouldn't tell you, therein is another reason why they want to cover all this up, why they want it to go away. Not only did they benefit from it, and they want more benefit from it in the 2020 because there's so many Republicans in the Senate on the ballot this year, but they were complicit. They freaking knew.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Why do so many people want to stay? I mean, you look at Rod Rosenstein. I mean, the White House tried to, according to Mueller, tried to get him to lie. The president tried to get him to lie and say that he was the one who was wanting you fired and is the one who brought it up. Yeah. He refused to do that. But then in a speech as he's leaving, he praises the president for respecting the rule of law.
Huh.
I think people like that, like Rod Rosenstein, who are people of accomplishment but not real sterling character, strong character, find themselves trapped. And then they start telling themselves a story to justify their being trapped, which is, yeah, he's awful, but the country needs me. The Republicans are doing this in Congress now. Yeah, it's awful, but if I speak, I'll get defeated, and this nation needs me here right now. And so they start to make little compromises to stay on the team, echo his words, use the term spying, talk about collusion, or just be silent, thinking that's what I need to do to survive. And in the process, he has eaten their soul. They're lost. And so that's what explains what happens to so many of these people. They become trapped. They're not strong enough to push out of it. And they end up making compromises that they lose everything.
So Rod Rosenstein, you're saying, is a person not of a strong character?
Yeah, I don't think he is. Of accomplishment, very bright, but he's not strong enough.
Wow. Wow. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Okay, so here's yesterday. This is Rod Rosenstein's big send-off that they had at the Department of Justice. This was his farewell party. And Bill Barr is making jokes about the fact that Rosenstein was such a patsy, such a fall down, weak, lily-livered character, such a, smart guy, no integrity kind of, it's got that dull, useless look. They're making jokes about that. They're making jokes about how Rod Rosenstein was willing to stand there while Bill Barr lied about what was in the Mueller report.
There's been a debate raging for the last few months, and I think we have to get it resolved and decided tonight. And that is, which one of us is capable of the most deadpan expression? Now, I know this is a little unfair because I do my best work in the hearing, in congressional hearings. Rod does his standing behind the Attorney General at press conferences. So, what do you say? Is it Rod or me? Rod?
20 minutes.
Sick. Absolutely sick. They are actually celebrating who lies better, who's got the best poker face, who's willing to stand there, and deadpan it, who's willing to lie for the president under oath, who's better, me or him, me or him. It's a sick, corrupt thing. Now, here's Comey on Bill Barr's behavior, which just it's shocking. It's just shocking.
You think of the way Attorney General Barr has behaved? Because you had talked earlier, I think right when, maybe before the summary came out or right after the summary came out, that you needed to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I think, and I said that because I think his career had earned that. And so I tried to withhold judgment. He did a very good thing in offering transparency. Most of the report is unredacted, so we could see it. And then I think he acted in a way that's less than honorable in the way he described it in writing and described it during a press conference and continues to talk as if he's the president's lawyer. That is not the Attorney General's job. It's a political appointment by the president, but you lead an institution that belongs to the American people and not the president.
You think he's behaving less than honorably?
I do.
Oh.
Yeah, and look, I'm sorry to... He's an accomplished and very smart person and who had nothing to lose in taking this job but his reputation. But it doesn't make me happy to say this, but I think he has lost most of his reputation with the way he's conducted himself.
Do you know why he's doing it?
I don't. I can speculate, but I don't know. People are complicated, but it is deeply concerning.
Oh, I really wish there would have been a follow-up there. What's your speculation? Why do you think he's doing it? Why? Why do you think? Because that is the $64 million question. Why? I mean, we get that Rod Rosenstein is a weak guy. We get that he cries at work. We get that he begs the president to not fire him, over Twitter. We get, we know that Don McGahn only wanted to put his wife's friends and his friends on various courts across this country as a dyed-in-the-wool conservative. He saw his shot and he took it and he nominated, talked the president into nominating Kavanaugh and all this crap. So we know what McGahn's motive is and was, but we don't know what Bill Barr's motive is and was, except that Bill Barr fancies himself the cover-up king. Okay, that's what Bill Barr's reputation really is. He did that in Iran-Contra after, like I said, the staff attorneys had, the House and the Senate during the Iran-Contra debacle, which was the biggest amount of law breaking you'd seen up to that time, where we were selling TOW missiles to Iran. And then we were laundering the money through Saudi Arabia. And then the money was used to buy not just weapons and run guns into Central America so we could overthrow various governments we didn't like in Central America, all in the name of beating back communism. But that they then realized that the money would go further if they would buy drugs, actual drugs from Central America, and then put it into neighborhoods in South Central LA, Compton, these kinds of places, and, turn it into crack so you could get 10 times the value out of it. And we ended up with a massive, massive drug epidemic that way. And it all came crashing down. So the House and the Senate had these joint hearings, their judiciary committees combined, and we had a House and Senate joint Judiciary Committee hearings that went on for, everybody watched it. I mean, it was just compelling television. I was really, pretty much just about old enough to understand what was going on. But I've, interviewed Lawrence Walsh, who was the independent counsel in Iran-Contra. His report took years and years. And his report, you know how Mueller's had Volume 1 and Volume 2? The Iran-Contra report is 12 volumes. It's unfreaking believable. But I've interviewed Lawrence Walsh enough and read enough books about it and was able to talk to him after, all those years about Oliver North and about what happened with Caspar Weinberger and blah, because he was. So they're lying to you when they tell you that staff attorneys have never, and, Bill Barr, they're changing the rules for him when McCarthy stands up yesterday and tells you. That's a lie, because Iran-Contra, not only did they have joint hearings with the House and the Senate, but before the members could question a witness, a cabinet member, like Edwin Meese, who was the Attorney General, or Caspar Weinberger, who was the Secretary of Defense, cabinet members, the staff attorneys questioned them first. And then if the House staff attorney asked a bunch of questions, then the Senate staff attorney would ask a bunch of questions. And then, and only then, did the members get to question. So that's just a big lie. And almost everything that the Republicans are saying is a big lie. So why is it that guys like Lindsey Graham, best friends with John McCain, who called the president a kook, are now saying, it's over for me, I don't need to see anymore? Obviously, it's because they knew this was all going down when it was going down and stayed quiet.
The Randi Rhodes Show is live on RandiRhodes.com and the free Progressive Voices app for Android and iOS. Visit the App Store or ProgressiveVoices.com now.
The president is not above the law, and I don't accept the notion that because the president is the head of the executive branch, he can't ever obstruct justice in connection with the executive branch activities. That's just crazy and a recipe for lawlessness. So the question is, did the president act in a way that manifested a corrupt intent, not the discharge of his constitutional duties, but a corrupt intent to interfere with an ongoing proceeding or to intimidate or tamper with a witness? That's a factual question. There's a whole lot of facts laid out in Bob Mueller's report that raise serious questions about whether there's a chargeable case for obstruction and witness tampering against this president.
Do you think he had criminal intent based on what you have seen now in the Mueller report?
It sure looks like he did in connection with a couple episodes. The direction to Don McGahn to get the special counsel fired is, to my mind, a flaming example
of corrupt intent.
Yes, of corrupt intent. And I know even the Attorney General has said, well, what the president meant was he wanted Don McGahn to convey his concerns. Well, really? Don McGahn went and called his lawyer, packed his office, and said he was going to quit. I don't think that's the reaction of the White House counsel when it's about conveying
So
concerns.
in your opinion, there was corrupt intent, at least in several of those episodes. By
sure looks that
Trump.
way from the report's factual recitation.
Yeah, it does. And this is the dilemma we're in. We have a criminal as a president. Not only is he an unindicted co-conspirator in the Michael Cohen case, and Michael Cohen is now sitting in Otisville eating matzo ball soup and playing tennis, but the president is an unindicted co-conspirator in that case. And in this case, with obstruction, we know that there are at least 10 episodes outlined in Mueller's report that meet all the different elements that need to be present in order to show corrupt intent, in order to show witness tampering, in order to show that he tried to end the investigation using his power, and that he lied. So all those things are there, and the president is a criminal. There is no doubt. And as far as the collusion goes, collusion is not a crime, and we would find the answer not just in Mueller's report, where he lays out 251 different contacts with Russian officials, with Junior, but you also see that collusion is part of the counterintelligence investigation, and that investigation remains with the FBI. And we've not seen that report. Now, that's the part that Adam Schiff and Devin Nunes, you want to see a little bit of, bipartisanship. In the House Intelligence Committee, you have the chairman, Adam Schiff, the Democrat, and the ranking member now, Devin Nunes, who was the chairman prior to the big blue wave. And they both agree. They want the unredacted Mueller report. They want it, and they are in agreement and have subpoenaed the unredacted Mueller report as intelligence committee members. Same thing in the Senate now, except the Senate is still in Republican hands. So the chairman is Republican Senator Richard Burr from North Carolina, together with the ranking member in the Senate on the Intelligence Committee, Senator Warner. They have subpoenaed the unredacted Mueller report. So isn't that fascinating? And it's because they know that their committees were lied to. Now, Nunes probably is operating under some, weird tinfoil hat theory that somehow if he can get the unredacted report, it'll clear Donald Trump or it'll clear Junior or something like that. I don't know why, because Junior never talked to Mueller, but he's probably doing it for that reason. Burr, on the other hand, check this out. Richard Burr, chairman of the Intelligence Committee, was briefed. The Gang of Eight was briefed by the Obama administration, by James Comey, by the FBI, of the existence of a counterintelligence investigation that was opened in July of 2016. Okay, they had enough evidence that something untoward was going on with Russian interference in our democracy, in our elections. They had enough information to show that the Russian government was interested in helping Donald Trump and disrupting our democracy and polarizing this country to the point where democracy looked like a really messy, bad idea to the rest of the world. That's what they wanted, okay? And they hated Hillary Clinton because she was tough on Russia. The Gang of Eight was briefed. Now, that would include Burr, and that would include John McCain. And John McCain obviously understood what that briefing was about. And then later, and this is why the conspiracy theorists over at One Vowel Movement, away from what it does to the news, Fox News, put the U where the O belongs. They are peddling some really, bizarre conspiracy theory that the dossier started this. The dossier did it. Well, here's their timeline debunked, right? Comey opened up a counterintelligence investigation in July. McCain was given the dossier in September. 2 months later, already the counterintelligence investigation was going on in the FBI, and then McCain gets the dossier. Chris Steele doesn't know what to do. He's freaking out. He doesn't think anybody's taking him seriously about what he's found, and so he wants to hand it over to the American government. So he hands it to John McCain, who he apparently trusts. John McCain obviously tells Lindsey Graham about it. And Lindsey Graham and Burr and all these people, they do nothing. They do absolutely nothing. Except McCain hands it over to the FBI. And the FBI gets it in October. Meaning Papadopoulos has already been looked into. They already sent somebody over there to talk to him about whether or not Russia had thousands of emails on Hillary Clinton, which is what he was telling an Australian diplomat, an Australian ambassador. He's bragging about it. And so the counterintelligence investigation was already opened by the time the dossier became known to anybody. And McCain this is why Donald Trump hates John McCain even past the grave, in perpetuity. You know that horrible word I say, never sign anything that's got the words in perpetuity in it, because it means they own whatever it is that you're contracting to give for not even while you're alive, but after your death. They continue to own whatever it is you're contracting to give. Don't ever sign. Well, in perpetuity, Donald Trump will hate John McCain. And now I understand from Comey last night why Lindsey Graham has done a complete 180, why he has flipped, why he's suddenly a bootlicker. It's because Lindsey Graham also knew. Lindsey Graham knew everything that was going on. So did Mitch McConnell know everything that was going on. And he chose to not say anything or do anything or prevent anything or help with the joint statement that Barack Obama wanted to put out to the American people, to let them know what was going on, to let them know that there was a counterintelligence investigation into that campaign, so that it would not be the Democrats are fixing the election for Hillary Clinton, which you know it would have been. But Lindsey Graham refused. They all refused. Well, Barr is not going to run for re-election ever. Barr isn't even on the ballot in 2020, but he's not going to run again when he is on the ballot in 2022. And so I got this funny feeling that Barr sees his exposure, and there must be a Mrs. Barr somewhere who's like saying this to him, because I know the stuff I said to various lobbyists that were trying to be my friend when I lived in D.C. and were trying to explain away all their, their tax manipulation and building loopholes and the carried interest loophole and the for-profit education lobbyists and all those guys that were trying to tell themselves a story so it would all be excusable behavior. But it was never going to be excusable behavior because the tobacco lobbyists lived in big houses, but they were totally suppressing evidence that it kills people. And now the for-profit education people, they were trying to knock out a phrase called gainful employment from the law, meaning if you paid for a for-profit online school, that they had to guarantee you that you had at least a good chance of gainful employment after, right? And I watched them try to explain all this away. So I know this weak mind of very smart people with very poor character. And I promise you, Lindsey Graham and Bill Burr and Richard Burr have Lindsey Graham I don't think has a wife. But Lindsey Graham probably told himself this story. Well, John McCain is dead, but I have to continue to live. And I knew what John knew, but I didn't say anything. And John was sick. And that's why he voted against the repeal. It was the only way he could protest. But I have to keep on getting elected. I have to keep on living. Burr, on the other hand, I believe is trying to make what he did right. And that's why they called Junior for the Trump Tower meeting. That's why they called him back. Either that or it's the ultimate case of white boy privilege. Oh, you lied, so come back and correct the record so you don't get locked up with your father.
Mary had a little man.
We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
My son is a good person. My son testified for hours and hours. My son was totally exonerated by Mueller.
None of that is true.
Who, frankly, does not like Donald Trump, this Donald Trump. And frankly, for my son, after being exonerated, to now get a subpoena to go again and speak again after close to 20 hours of telling everybody that would listen about a nothing meeting. Yeah, I'm pretty surprised.
So should he fight that? Should he fight that subpoena?
Well, we'll see what happens. I'm just very surprised. I really am by it. Yeah.
Will you allow Robert Mueller to testify in Congress?
Well, I'm going to leave that up to our very great Attorney General, and he'll make a decision on that.
Okay, so here's what I can tell you happened today. So far, we know Bob Mueller will not be testifying next week. We thought it was going to be May 15th, and now we know that it will not happen. Mueller is not going to testify next week. That is off the table. Today, Richard Neal, the House Ways and Means Committee chairman, who is entitled to see the tax returns of any citizen, anybody, that he requests that he and his committee be able to see the tax returns for, has subpoenaed the IRS commissioner and Mnuchin because they are blanketly denying the president's taxes to the House Ways and Means Committee, who is entitled to see them. And the reason is because Donald Trump is a fraud. Donald Trump is a fake. Donald Trump is a screw-up. Donald Trump is a spectacularly unsuccessful businessman. Donald Trump is a person who wouldn't know how to run a business if, he had to. And remember, his pledge to us was he would run this country like he ran his businesses. And now today we find out that he's doubling down on this stupid trade war with China, and that China says, well, you gave us a deadline of January 1st, and that came and went. Then you said you'd deal with us on March 1st, and that came and went. And now you're putting another 25% tariff on another $250 billion worth of stuff. Guess what? We're going to have to take countermeasures. And Donald Trump, who once told you he loved trade wars because they were easy to win, is now going to be passing on a tax to us, the consumers of the United States of America. It won't kick in for another 3 weeks. Why? Because the tariff is going to take effect tonight at midnight. Okay, and so tonight at midnight, whatever is still at sea, that will be taxed. Whatever gets here before midnight tonight, that won't be part of the new tariffs. So it'll take about 3 weeks for the things that are at sea to get to our shores. And when those things start to offload at our piers, at our docks, those things will then cost us 25% more. They estimate that it will cost us about $767 a year in, just purchases that we make, because it actually affects, luggage, backpacks for your kids, baseball gloves for your kids, furniture, chandelier, sailboats, motorboats, canoes, and weirdly parking meters. And then Donald Trump said he's also going to take a look at whether or not he thinks automobiles are part of a national security emergency that he's declared, and whether they need to be taxed. This is all going to get really freaking expensive. And then I look at your wages. I look at wages in the United States, and the wages haven't really moved. They haven't really changed. But the cost of living continually increases. The cost of health insurance wiped out any increase in wages. I mean, it was like a 2%, 3% increase in wages. But the cost of health insurance has skyrocketed way past that. And so we're in the hole to begin with if we have health insurance. If you didn't have health insurance and you were going without health insurance, there used to be a tax at the end of the year. It was $619 to go without paying for health insurance, because when you showed up at the emergency room, the cost of treating you would be passed on to me. So we taxed you $619 to spread that cost over the population of people who were willing to pay premiums for health insurance, whether you got it from your employer or you got it on your own from the exchange. And then they wiped out, Congress zeroed out that tax. And now you're about to get taxed $767 just for buying stuff, because Donald Trump is a loser, because he doesn't understand what he's doing.
President Trump jacked up tariffs on thousands of goods, dishwashers, frozen fish, baseball caps. Right now, about half of the products China sells to the U.S. now carry an import tax. How we got here. Look, 3 rounds of tariffs last year. First, the U.S. put tariffs on all foreign steel and aluminum, including from China. Then in July, the U.S. singled out Beijing, slapping tariffs on $50 billion worth of high-tech Chinese exports. And China hit back with $50 billion in U.S. goods as well. These are mainly ag products, devastating American soybean farmers. But the biggest round yet came in September. $200 billion in Chinese goods, consumer goods like luggage, handbags, and hats. Beijing hit back with tariffs on $60 billion in U.S. exports in response. Now, that $200 billion in September, that was originally a 10% tax. Today,
25.
As of midnight, it's now 25%. Now, remember, it is U.S. importers, not China, who pay these tariffs. And experts warn that there could be an economic hit, that Trump's tariffs could disrupt smaller American companies in particular. One analysis finds it could cost the U.S. about 900,000 jobs and raise prices for the average family of 4 by $767 a year. And this trade war, guys, is not over. The president says he has started the paperwork for 25% tariffs on $325 billion more in Chinese imports. That would be every shoe, every pair of blue jeans, everything you buy from China would cost 25% more. He also has until May 18th to decide whether to impose global auto tariffs if he declares that car imports are a national security risk.
He promised he was going to run this country like he runs his businesses. And his businesses, as you know, from the information that we were able to get from reporters at the New York Times who did an amazing job, were able to show you that Donald Trump was the outlier in the world of rich people. He had more losses than any other tax filer in almost every year that they looked at. In almost every year that they looked at. This man is and the jokes were he's the biggest loser, who wants to pretend to be a billionaire is what The Apprentice should have been called. Or, I looked at it, it's a game of loans and, the banks stopped lending to him. So the big question now is those tax returns that the New York Times was able to get their hands on, those were old tax returns, okay? They were from, 1985 to 1992, something like this. But what they did show was a lot of tax fraud, except the statute of limitations is passed. So it's not like they found, that they could prosecute the president. But now the question is, who is paying Donald Trump? Because he doesn't have any money. So who is paying him? And that is why the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee has subpoenaed now Trump's taxes. Because we need to know who is paying Donald Trump, who is running our economy like he runs his businesses, all on debt. The only big piece of legislation that Donald Trump has ever passed is that tax cut. And that tax cut was given on borrowed money. What Trump was able to do was explode our deficit because $1.2 trillion was borrowed in order to give it to his wealthy donor class, to give it to the Koch brother industries, to give it to Sheldon Adelson's casinos, to give it to Sheldon Adelson's income, right? And so he borrowed all that money. This is exactly the way he has run his businesses into the ground.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
If Donald Trump Jr. defies this subpoena, he ought to be jailed. Very simply, he has no privilege. He has no right to simply say no. He may be the president's son, but he's not above the law, and he has no privilege whatsoever.
And Wolf, a lot of people commenting today, but one person who did not comment was Richard Burr himself. We tried several times to talk to him, and he told me flat out, I am not taking any questions today. Even when I asked him, does that mean your subpoena is voluntary, as Trump Jr. seems to be suggesting he would not take that question.
He wouldn't answer the question. I have a funny feeling that that Richard Burr, the Senate Intelligence Committee chair, who joined together with Warner to subpoena Jr., is one of the people who knew what was going on when it was going on, and tried to tell the White House, because we've had stories where Richard Burr was running back channel information to the White House about this counterintelligence investigation and about how information was actually building, and that he was providing them with updates from the FBI. And so maybe, Burr has decided that he's not going to, I know he's not going to run again. And maybe, he's like, I got to make this right, because this whole thing is just coming apart at the seams. Perhaps this is a crack in the, ass crack of Trumpism. Maybe it's starting to split. Maybe Trumpism is breaking down. Maybe they understand, those 20 that are on the ballot, maybe they understand that they can't win with Crazy Boy running this country like he ran his businesses right into the ground. Maybe they understand that we will see his taxes. It's going to happen. And that we will learn that he is a fraud and a cheat, and that he never paid taxes. He didn't pay taxes 8 of 10 years. And after those, during the 8 years he paid no taxes, he was fraudulently writing down losses. He was, saying, oh, it's sport, tricking the IRS and defrauding the IRS and all this stuff. I got away with it, so therefore I'll do it again and again and again. That those tax returns are going to show all that and more. It's going to show who's paying them now. Now, they have a good shot with Deutsche Bank has already started to provide documents. Private companies can't be controlled as easily by the Attorney General of the United States. And so Deutsche Bank and Mazars, who is the accounting firm for Donald Trump, they are producing documents. The taxes will get produced because it says shall furnish. Now, we won't see them. That's the thing. We won't see them. But the House will. And they will be able to cross-examine people. And they will be able to get to the bottom of what Trump does to get paid. Who does he get money from? Where does the money come from? Why did a bank that was fined multiple billions of dollars for laundering Russian money, why was that bank, Deutsche Bank, the only bank in the world that would lend to Donald Trump? No other bank would lend to Donald Trump. So we're going to find out. Maybe some of them are wise and, getting wise. I don't know. And they're going to bail because these are not people of any integrity, character, loyalty, or particular, love for Donald Trump. These are the lily-livered, weak people who just play a game, using the Senate rules and saying, I'm going to prevent this one from being a two-term president. I'm going to do that over there. I'm not going to let him seat that Supreme Court. They play games with us. That's all it's become in the Senate. The Senate, one of the most, austere bodies in the, it's like Rome. It's like Rome. And Rome will betray Caesar again. There's too much corruption. I don't think that they're down with all this, only because their own hides are on the line. I think that they thought that they would benefit from another round of meddling, another round of interference, another round of social media, another round of, bots, another round of bullcrap, another round of conspiracy theories, And now I guess they're starting to realize that 800 federal prosecutors are on to them. They're now, I think it's up to 800 former federal prosecutors who've worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations who have signed a statement saying that Mueller's findings would have produced obstruction charges against President Trump if he weren't president. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree.
No doubt.
No doubt. Again, there's 10 different episodes. I actually think the ones that would be most likely charged are not necessarily the ones that involved me, but particularly this McGahn episode and another episode where he was trying to get the Attorney General to limit the investigation only to future elections are examples that any reasonable prosecutor would charge.
Mueller basically was operating and going by Department of Justice guidelines that a sitting president can't be indicted. Was he right to do that?
I don't know. He was trying to, as best, I haven't talked to him, but reading his report.
But he loves you.
I keep forgetting that. I can't wait to see all the pictures of us hugging and kissing. Because they're not in my iCloud account. Maybe somebody else has them. Send them if you have them. He was trying, I think, to do something principled and fair. And I can tell you from personal experience, sometimes when you try to do that, people misunderstand you. He said, I can't indict the president because of Department of Justice policy. And given that, it would be unfair to accuse him of a crime in a document when he can't vindicate himself through a trial. So what I'll do is look at it and say, could I say there's nothing there, which I could clear him, but if I can't say that, I ought to just lay out the facts for a future prosecutor. It's often overlooked that he says that in the report, so that a judgment can be made after he's president about whether to charge him, and so that Congress can discharge its duties. Now, the problem is that's very nuanced and principled in an effort to be fair, that the Attorney General distorted with the way he described it, and that confused a lot of people.
Yeah, the Attorney General distorted the report. The Attorney General is lying for this president. 800 federal prosecutors have said so. And I got a funny feeling that a lot of the Republicans who were on the ticket in 2020 in the Senate are starting to understand that before 2020, we're going to see the president's tax returns. And before 2020, we're going to get additional testimony from his son. And before 2020, we're going to get additional information from Mueller. And before 2020, we're going to get additional information from Don McGahn. And that there's going to be next week a vote of contempt on Don McGahn and Bill Barr jointly, and that it's going to go to a court, and that if they then defy court orders, this Constitution is broken. And it may be dawning on them that he is not worth it. It may be dawning on them that all that information that's about to become very, very known, very, very public, very, very, and that there still is a counterintelligence report that we haven't seen.
Do you think the Russians have leverage over President Trump?
I don't know the answer to that.
Think it's possible?
Yes.
Oh, my God. Do you think the Russians have leverage? I don't know the answer to that. Do you think it's possible? Yes.
Do you think the Russians have leverage over President Trump?
I don't know the answer to that.
Think it's possible?
Yes.
Oh, maybe it's dawning on them that they need new tactics, that they need a new president, that they need to, spare themselves. But it may be too late for a lot of them. It really might be too late because obviously there's a counterintelligence report out there that will clearly show who knew what and when and why they said nothing.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
If he fails to answer, he ought to be put in jail. If he fails to comply with a lawful subpoena, he has no privilege. Prison is the only answer.
Yeah, Mr. I Believe himself, a senator threatening a private citizen with jail over a hoax. Wow.
Oh, my God.
We used to be the United States of America, a real democratic republic. After lies and conspiracy theories, this is how you want to treat the first family? Unbelievable. Sad, pathetic. And while Blumenthal is stuck in his never-ending cycle of fake Russian vitriol, while other Democrats and some of the media mob, their willing accomplices, have moved on to breathless hysteria over President Trump's taxes. So-called bombshell report from the New York Times revealing years of Trump tax documents from the 80s and 90s, 35 years ago, showing that real estate mogul lost over $1 billion. Now, this isn't even news because actually, the president himself pointed this out many times, one being the very first episode of The Apprentice in 2004.
Okay, so, I mean, that's the alternative reality that exists on this cable channel, where they just keep feeding these people, that the Russians didn't really interfere in our elections. 800 federal prosecutors are incorrect. Mueller is incorrect. Trump Jr. lied to the Senate when he was behind closed doors, never, ever spoke to Robert Mueller. But he's a private citizen, and therefore can't be held in contempt of Congress? How does that work in your stupid little pea brain? How does that actually work? So Congress subpoenas you, and you defy the subpoena, and somehow you're immune from being held in contempt of Congress. I mean, this is just the drivel, the swill, the bullcrap that they feed to the lamest of the lame that sit there and watch this crap day in, day out and root for America to fail. Literally are out there every single day wanting this all to, happen again because they don't want to recognize that it happened at all. And then if you don't recognize that it happened at all, well, tell me, how does Congress make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, they don't. John in Washington.
Hi, Randi Rhodes. I just love you, and your analysis is so spot on and so good. Anyway, enough of that. When we were both younger,
I'm still younger.
Patrick Fitzgerald, or was it Gerald Fitzpatrick?
Patrick
I always
Fitzgerald.
forget that prosecutor. Okay, he made a analogy to himself being an umpire and having sand kicked in his eyes.
Right.
The fact that people lied and destroyed, and I was like 12 or 13 when Nixon was pardoned, and I was in the Navy when Reagan and the whole Iran-Contra crap went down. I'm so tired of seeing these people do this stuff. How bad are Trump's taxes, and how bad is the redacted part of the Mueller report when they will fight to the death to ever have us?
You know what my question is, and it's a very, very simple one. If they have nothing to hide, why are they hiding everything?
I thought he was exonerated. Wouldn't Mueller testify?
Right. Wouldn't he want that? Wouldn't he want Mueller under oath exonerating him, exonerating his son, exonerating, saying, oh, Russia was a hoax. It never happened. I mean, wouldn't you want that if it was fake, if it was false, if it was phony?
Well, and Mueller could come up there and testify, oh, no, there's no problem with the emoluments clause. I've looked through the president's finances.
Well, Mueller
There's no problem with the Saudis.
I was going to say, it's not.
He didn't.
Well, right, because. Right, just so you don't confuse people, Mueller did not look
Sorry, I'm being sarcastic, and you're right.
Yes,
yeah, Mueller didn't look into his finances, but he's claiming that he's been cleared, like you were talking earlier about the emoluments clause, and we know he gets money from the Russians. We know he gets money from the Saudis.
We don't know where his money comes from. We have no idea. Where does this man's money come from? And that's why
we're starting to know.
Well, we will know once this subpoena is complied with. Now, if Mnuchin wants to defy that subpoena, if Rettig, the IRS commissioner, wants to defy that subpoena, well, fine. Then we'll do a joint, contempt, not just with McGahn and not just with the Attorney General Bill Barr, but we'll also include the name Steve Mnuchin, and we'll also include the IRS commissioner, Mr. Rettig. I mean, if that's what it takes, and then if they defy the courts, we don't have a country anymore. Well, at least it's not.
And you have.
I was going to say it's just not. It's not a democratic republic anymore. It's not anything. It's a.
Yeah, and we don't have a good enough word for it.
Well, I mean, what it would become.
Steve Mnuchin. Go ahead. Well, Steve Mnuchin has to ask himself. With the 10 years that came out previously, and New York State is going to hand over his state tax returns. I mean, this stuff is going to come out. They act like they can hold back the rotation of the earth. And it's like America is, Donald Trump picked the wrong country to mess with.
Yeah.
And so did the Russians.
Yeah.
Because, I can't go anywhere because I can't afford to move. So I'm going to stay here. You had a viewer scold you the other day about saying, well, about your plan that if things get really bad. And, nobody can blame anyone of Jewish heritage to say, you know what? I'm going to get while the getting's good, because with that history, are you kidding me? You know, it's
not
like,
even that. I mean, it really isn't even that. I'll tell you what it is. If the president gets his way, he's already revoked the press passes of, like a bunch of Washington Post reporters, and they have had their press passes given back to them on an exception, so that they now serve at the pleasure of Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And it's a very twisted story. But if the president takes us to war, or the president gets his way with the media, the only way to broadcast would be for me to leave the country and do it on another country's internet. And so what I've done is I've set up a place where I can go, where I just installed fiber optic in another country. Okay. And the studio, I have my old equipment, which I didn't sell. Okay, I put in all this new equipment, but I still have the old equipment, which it will suffice. It was good enough for 2 years, and build it in another country so that I can talk to people.
You're thinking 3 moves ahead, Randy. I love you. Sorry about the delay on my phone.
That's okay. I mean, I always think ahead. And with this man, you have to think ahead. What will you do? I mean, I gave you an analogy the other day where you live in a town where the sheriff is corrupt, and the mayor is corrupt, and the police are corrupt, and all this. And City Hall is just, completely bought. So then you go to the state, or you go to the feds, or, you file for a Freedom of Information Act request to show, this one's paid off or that one. Whatever it is, right? It's not a dead end. It's a horrible situation for you and your family, but it's not a dead end. Losing America... Now, that would be dicey, because then where do you go?
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
This subpoena for Don Jr. is just apparently part of just generic oversight. What's your reaction tonight?
Oh, well, I mean, I respect both senators very, very much. I've actually campaigned for both of them. I don't understand what the oversight is. I mean, he testified for 29 hours, I think.
Now we're up to 29.
So maybe there's a question or two that wasn't asked. They could, send him an interrogatory and get the answer. I don't know why you'd harass the man more than you have. I mean, actually, Mueller came to a pretty definitive conclusion that Donald Trump Jr. did nothing wrong.
What?
That there was no suggestion that he would have any reason to have believed that it was a violation of the law to meet with that Russian woman. It turns out that the really interesting part of that meeting is it looks like a setup by Fusion GPS, because the woman met with Glenn Simpson, the head of that, the day before, the day of, and the day after. They never followed up. I've been doing this a long time, and if that isn't a setup, I'd be really surprised.
Oh, my God. Holy... Put that back up. I want to show everybody something. Look at this dye job on Rudy's head. Look at that right there. Now, I don't know what color the president is right now, because he did this Panama City rally and he looked like rotted pumpkin. I don't know what that color was. And there's Rudy, with a bad dye job on his head. Stephen Miller actually spray paints his hair on his head. What is going on with these freaks? Why even bother? I mean, does Nosferatu there think that it's going to make him look less vampirish? I mean...
Does he not realize that we saw him like 2 weeks ago on TV with gray hair? Like,
I don't even, understand what this attempt is.
It's 2001, Rudy. Look, everybody, he's trustworthy again. Oh.
I don't... Yeah, right. With darker hair, we're going to now believe that it was a setup meeting, even though Rob Goldstone is emailing Trump Jr., like repeatedly saying the Russian government supports your father, and we would like to set up a meeting to give you dirt on Hillary Clinton. He's saying, it was a setup. It was just a... Yeah, Rob Goldstone, who is the publicist for Emin Agalarov, head of the Crocus Group, which I have video of Donald Trump sitting in front of their step and repeat, right, their sign, in 2013... in Russia, saying he's going to do a Trump Tower Moscow with the... Somehow Fusion GPS set up Donald Trump Jr. What? I mean, they're crazy. They're absolute morons. But the people who imbibe, the people who actually listen to this and repeat it to me, my heart breaks. I really feel so bad for them, because in the end, they're going to find out that they were the good Germans. Do you know what I'm saying? When it all hits the fan. And that's why yesterday I kept saying, you're going to apologize to me. You will be sorry. And they will be sorry. And they will apologize to me. The real men among them will apologize to me. And there are a few. Just like they apologized to me after W took us to war in Iraq. And they were all fighting me and saying I didn't love my country, support the troops. And they were flying their American flag on their freaking antenna on their damn cars and yelling at me, not knowing that I had served, that I was a veteran. I mean, it was just so sick. It's just so twisted, the stuff that they have to tell themselves in order to go there and support a xenophobic, horrendous, amoral, lying sack of failure that is the reality TV star that we all know as Donald Trump. It's just amazing. I mean, the arguments they keep trying to throw at us are just so empty. They're so easily debunked. McCarthy with his, they changed the rules. Barr was right not to show up. That was easily debunked. The fact that Junior, if he's subpoenaed, has to show up, no matter he's a private citizen, he's the Secretary of Defense. It doesn't matter. If Congress subpoenas you, you have to show. You have to appear. The president is invoking powers he doesn't own. He doesn't have. Blanket denials that he has to follow the law. What? Retroactive declarations of executive privilege. What? Over documents that have already become public that we've seen. What? Got to unsee what you saw. It makes no sense because it's nonsense. And the question for each and everybody to respond to any Trump pansy, any cult member, anybody that's just down with all this crap is, if they have nothing to hide, why are they hiding everything? It makes no sense. And that is the simplest way to talk to them. They have no answer. They'll go dead quiet on you. Michael in California.
Hey, Randy.
Hey, Michael.
Love you. A couple of weeks ago, you told us to be prepared to do things that we might normally do. Do you remember that?
No, I said make a list of things that you would never do. And if you find yourself doing them, then you know you've gone off the rails.
Well, I thought you also said that be prepared to do things you might not have done before. Well, today you told us what you would do, how far you're willing to go.
Yeah.
To go to another country.
Yes.
But we're living history right now. And I have a friend in San Diego that's taking this much worse than I am. And I had to tell him, you're witnessing history. Mm-hmm. You are experiencing something that is going to be written about for decades and decades. And how are you going to hold yourself responsible for what you do and experiencing this? And what are we all going to do to step up? Because this is a crisis, the constitutional crisis, as you have said, of a major proportion. And years ago, they were going to do a con. This was back in the 80s, a constitutional Congress, or constitutional Congress. And I was working at a political firm in Kansas City. And the owners were approached to help run this campaign. The entire staff said, no, we will walk out. We will leave. We will not do this. And they turned the job down.
Well, one of the things, if you're in the military, obviously this is what we've learned watching him threaten Venezuela until Putin got on the phone with him and told him Maduro is ours. Hands off. We want Venezuela. Maybe we'll give you Iran, but we want Venezuela. Okay, so there's some deal going on because, Pompeo ends up in Baghdad this week and then next Tuesday is going to be with Putin. All right, so something's going on. But here's the thing. What we learned is whoever has the military is the winner. So I would say to my fellow service members, to my fellow vets, to people who are, likely to be called up to fight in some bogus war, just say that the commander-in-chief is illegitimate and you don't have to follow illegal orders. Because
I grew up in the
whoever,
military.
that's just another aspect of it. This has nothing
I
to do.
grew up in the military.
Yeah.
My father was career Air Force.
Yeah.
And I can't believe that the military would follow this man if it came down to it.
Well,
I
you know
really
what
can't.
military life is. You don't get a newspaper
Yes.
every day. So, people don't know what's going on around them. They're just, they're on a ship somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean. Somebody's going to call in an order. They're going to get the order. They're going to fire. It's just going to happen that way.
I want to send a shout out to Howard for supporting you. And I think he's really a great guy.
Well,
I
thank
love
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. He loves you too. Jerry in Los Angeles.
Hi, Randy.
Hello.
You're a patriot, and I just wanted to preface what I'm saying is my wife and I just don't understand why you're not on prime time, and we just get this sneaky suspicion that some of these pundits use you as a primer for a lot of their stuff. Because stuff that I hear early in the day sometimes leaks its way upwards into the evening, but that's not the point of my call. Watching the speaker say that we're being baited into impeaching him, I think is it's a plan of attack that may have worked for a sort of a normal administration, but part of me thinks that the outrage of our leadership in Congress has been a little muted, and that if they don't impeach, I think what's going to happen, I think Dems will stay home if nothing is done between now and 2020.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right about that. I do think Democrats will say, why am I voting for this? They did nothing.
Why am I voting?
Why am I voting for this? Or why am I voting yes? But here's my sneaky suspicion. I heard Gerald Nadler yesterday say, when they asked him about impeachment, he said, impeachment might not be the right prescription for this particular president, for this situation. I really believe that there is a counterintelligence investigation that remains with the FBI, that remains with Christopher Wray, who you don't hear much from. Although the little we heard from Chris Wray in this subcommittee hearing on appropriations this week, he's not down with AG Barr. He's not there. He's not in that camp of cover-up because he knows everything. Somehow I think the counterintelligence report is where their sights are set.
Right.
So that the American people will get to see that this president is a traitor, and that will take care of itself. I already see the Trumpism, splitting down the ass crack. I see it today with Burr and Warner subpoenaing Jr., and I see it with the subpoenas that are going out with Nunes and Schiff.